Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're doing something a little different. We've all heard the urban legends, the stories passed down through generations that feel more like campfire myths than reality. But what happens when the myths are actually documented? When the experiences aren't just figments of a wild imagination, but are etched into the memories of those who survived them? Today, I've gathered 3 of the most bone-chilling, verified true ghost stories that will make you rethink turning out the lights. We're going on a chronological journey through these hauntings, starting from a quiet suburb to the desolate highways and ending in a place where the air itself feels heavy with the dead. Get comfortable, grab a blanket, and let's dive into the darkness.
Our first story takes us back to the summer of 1994, to a quiet neighborhood in Massachusetts. The Miller family had just moved into what they thought was their dream home, a beautiful, sprawling Victorian house with a history as long as its hallways. For the first few weeks, everything was perfect, but soon the atmosphere began to shift. It started with small things, the smell of old tobacco in a non-smoking house, and the sound of heavy boots walking across the floorboards above when no one was upstairs. Sarah Miller, the youngest daughter, was the first to notice the man in the corner. She described him as a tall, slender figure in a dark suit who would simply watch her from the shadows of her bedroom, never moving, never speaking, just existing in the periphery of her vision.
By the second month, the activity in the Miller house had escalated from unsettling to terrifying. One evening, while Sarah's father, David, was in the basement fixing a leak, he felt a sudden freezing draft that made his breath visible in the air. He turned around to find all his tools, which had been neatly laid out on the workbench, now standing perfectly upright on their ends. Not a single one had fallen. It was as if gravity had simply ceased to apply to them. Heart pounding, he backed away, only to hear a raspy, guttural whisper right against his ear that said, "Leave the house." It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. He didn't wait for a second warning. He ran upstairs, grabbed his family, and they spent the night in a motel, too terrified to even pack a bag.
They eventually returned with a paranormal investigator, hoping for some rational explanation. What they found instead was a hidden crawl space behind the master bedroom closet. Inside were dozens of old, handwritten letters from the 1920s, written by a man who had lived in the house and lost his entire family to a house fire in the neighboring town. He had spent his final years in total isolation, obsessed with the idea that he could bring them back through occult rituals. The investigator noted that the man in the corner Sarah saw matched the description of this man perfectly. The family moved out shortly after, and the house has stood empty for nearly 30 years. Neighbors still claim to see a single light flickering in the attic window on the anniversary of the man's passing, even though the electricity has been cut off for decades.
Moving forward in time, we travel to the early 2000s, to the lonely, windswept stretches of Highway 191 in New Mexico. This road is known for its isolation, a place where you can drive for hours without seeing another set of headlights. A long-haul trucker named Marcus was making a late-night run, the desert moon his only companion. The hum of the engine was hypnotic, until his headlights caught a splash of white on the shoulder of the road. It was a woman, wearing a flowing white dress, walking barefoot along the gravel. Concerned for her safety in such a remote area, Marcus slowed his rig and pulled over. He leaned out the window to ask if she needed help, but as she turned her head toward him, Marcus realized something was deeply wrong. Her face was completely featureless, smooth, pale skin where eyes, a nose, and a mouth should have been.
Paralyzed by a primal fear, Marcus didn't wait to see more. He slammed the truck into gear and accelerated as fast as the heavy load would allow. He checked his side mirrors, expecting to see her there in the dust, but she was gone. Seconds later, he felt a heavy weight shift in the sleeper cab behind him. The air in the truck suddenly smelled like ozone and damp earth. He looked in his rearview mirror and saw a pair of pale, thin hands gripping the edge of the driver's seat. He couldn't see the face, but he felt the presence of someone or something sitting right behind him. He didn't dare look back. He kept his eyes glued to the road, praying for the sun to rise. feeling the cold pressure of those hands against his seat for over 50 miles until he finally reached a bright truck stop.
When he finally pulled into the well-lit parking lot and gathered the courage to check the back of his cab, it was empty. However, there were distinct, damp handprints on the fabric of the seat, and the temperature in the cab was still 20 degrees colder than the desert air outside. Marcus shared his story with other truckers at the diner, and to his horror, several veterans nodded in somber recognition. They called her the passenger. Local legend says she was a bride who died in a wreck on that stretch of road in the 1960s, and she's still looking for a ride home. Marcus never drove that route again, and even now, years later, he says he can still feel the cold sensation of those hands on the back of his chair whenever he's driving alone at night.
Our final story brings us to the present day, to a location notorious among paranormal researchers, the abandoned Blackwood Asylum. Unlike the previous stories, this one involves a group of urban explorers who were looking for a thrill but found something far more sinister. The asylum was shut down in the late 70s following reports of extreme patient neglect, and it has since become a rotting monument to human suffering. The group, led by a man named Elias, entered through a broken basement window. They were equipped with high-end cameras and audio recorders, hoping to catch a Class A electronic voice phenomenon. For the first hour, it was just the usual sounds of a decaying building, dripping water and scurrying rats. But as they descended into the surgical wing, the atmosphere changed. The air became thick, making it hard to breathe, and their flashlights began to dim simultaneously.
Elias stopped the group when he heard a sound that didn't belong in an empty building, the rhythmic clicking of metal against tile. It sounded like a gurney being pushed down the hall. They turned their cameras toward the sound, and in the green glow of the night vision, they saw a shadow moving. It wasn't just a shadow on the wall. It was a three-dimensional mass of darkness that seemed to absorb the light around it. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, heading straight for them. One of the explorers, a girl named Maya, suddenly collapsed to her knees, clutching her throat. She later described the feeling as if invisible hands were tightening around her neck, and the temperature around her plummeted so low that her skin began to turn blue. The group panicked, grabbing Maya and sprinting toward the exit, the metallic clicking sound chasing them all the way to the windows.
Once they were safely outside, they reviewed the footage. What they saw changed their lives. On the audio recording, through the static and their own screams, a clear, calm voice could be heard whispering Maya's name over and over again, followed by a chilling laugh. But the visual was even worse. In the frames where Maya was being choked, the night vision camera caught the faint outline of a man in a doctor's lab coat standing directly behind her, his translucent hands wrapped firmly around her throat. He was looking directly into the camera lens with a wide, malevolent grin. To this day, Maya still has faint scars on her neck that doctors can't explain, and the group has vowed never to step foot in an abandoned building again. Some places, they realized, are abandoned for a very good reason.
These stories serve as a haunting reminder that there is so much about our world that we simply don't understand. Whether it's the spirit of a lonely man in an old house, a hitchhiker looking for a ride home, or the malevolent echoes of a dark past in an asylum, these encounters leave a permanent mark on those involved. They aren't just tales to be told in the dark. They are the lived realities of people who have stared into the abyss and had the abyss stare back. It makes you wonder what might be lurking in the corners of your own home, or what might be waiting for you on a lonely stretch of road late at night. The paranormal isn't always something we find. Sometimes it finds us, whether we're ready for it or not.
Thank you for joining me for these terrifying true stories. If you enjoyed this journey into the paranormal, make sure to hit that like button and let me know in the comments which story creeped you out the most. Do you have a true ghost story of your own? I'd love to hear it. Maybe it'll even make it into a future video. We have plenty more mysteries and hauntings to explore, so stay tuned. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates. Sleep well tonight if you can. And remember,
you're never truly alone in the dark. I'll see you in the next one.